In the 90s, Arnold Schwarzenegger decided to set aside his serious and violent side from Terminator or Commando to become a kindergarten teacher. But why and how did the T-800 decide to venture into comedy? When he was at the peak of action cinema, was it a smart decision, or did all these comedy movies ended up being garbage? Well, to understand how Arnold transitioned from the muscular actor who only cared about shooting as many people as he could, we have to go back to his glorious years, the 80s. Despite trying to break into the world of cinema and acting since the 70s, it wasn't until the 80s, with Conan and Terminator, that he became known worldwide. These movies were so successful that Arnold became the go-to action man for any director. However, once he reached the top, Arnold needed to conquer new territories, one seemingly more challenging that would represent a fresh challenge for him. So as early as the mid-80s, Arnold was already thinking that his next adventure would be in the world of comedy, something completely opposite to what he had been doing, which gave him exactly what he needed in terms of difficulty. Thus, in 1985, he began to see his friend, the comedian Milton Berle, more frequently. Schwarzenegger persistently questioned Berle about the mechanics of comedy, which led Berle to gradually introduce him to prominent figures in the comedy scene. In 1987, Arnold would meet the person who would believe in him and turn his career as an action hero upside down, Ivan Reitman. Coincidentally, Arnold ended up spending time with the Ghostbusters director Ivan Reitman, who happened to be staying at the same resort. Following an evening filled with laughter and storytelling, Reitman remarked to Arnie, "There's a certain innocence about you that I've never seen come through on the screen, and a certain sense of humor." In the end, Reitman promised him that they would make a movie together. Just a week later, Reitman found himself at Disney Studios with Danny DeVito, which immediately reminded him of Arnold, who was the complete opposite. From there, he began to imagine that they would be the perfect or perhaps imperfectly perfect duo for the comedy he was looking for. Twins. The idea was that of two twins who were the product of an experiment to create the perfect human, with Arnold being the result of this and Danny DeVito the leftovers with errors. I must confess that before making this video, I had never seen some of the Arnold's movies, or only some parts. In the case of Twins, I only remember the first minutes, including the famous scene when he looks at a Rambo poster. After watching it in its entirety, I found it to be a good movie. Considering that it was written from the basic idea of two completely different twins, I think it was very enjoyable. DeVito was the one I liked the most, and I think Arnold did well in his role. However, this is one of those roles tailored for Arnold. That is Julius, the perfect twin who is a man that has spent his whole life on an island out of contact with society. So one would imagine him to be quite socially awkward. Therefore, Arnold's range of acting didn't have to be very wide, since if he gave a bad performance, it would still fit perfectly within the character of Julius. It's somewhat like Terminator, where no one would complain about a robot acting strangely. It doesn't surprise me this movie was a success, grossing $270 million worldwide. Although for Arnold, DeVito and Reitman, it was even better, because from the start, and due to the risk that this type of movie with an actor like Arnold represented, they decided not to take a salary. Instead, they accepted 37% of the film's revenue, which in the end was even better than if they had received a salary. Arnold's comedy debut would be phenomenal. So in the 90s, Arnold would alternate his role as an action hero with slightly more family-friendly comedies. For example, while filming Total Recall, he decided to audition for Reitman's new movie, Kindergarten Cop. Bill Murray and Patrick Swayze had also auditioned for this, but due to the success of Twins, Reitman teamed up again with Arnold. Towards the end of that year, filming would begin, but it would have to be paused for Terminator 2 promotions, scheduling Kindergarten Cop's release for Christmas 1990. The movie is about Kimball, an undercover cop posing as a kindergarten teacher who tries to find a criminal son along with his mother, with whom he later has a romance. As I mentioned before, this particular movie is one I had never seen, and although I had obviously heard of it, it surprised me in several ways. First, I didn't expect it to have so much violence, at least in the beginning, for a family movie. But I suppose that was the kind of family movie in the 90s? Second, once again I found it quite entertaining. The story, although simple, I think managed to evoke emotions. Like when Kimball discovers that one of his students is being mistreated at home. Despite some action and drama, the comedic touches are just right, leaving memorable quotes for history.
What's the matter?
I have a headache.
It might be a tumor.
It's not a tumor. It's not a tumor.
The movie was again a success, but since it competed that Christmas with Home Alone, it didn't do as well as expected, grossing $202 million worldwide.
I mean, it made everyone laugh, and so it was hugely successful. It was unbelievable, and I was so happy because it was actually my first movie that made domestically over $100 million, and it was a comedy, not an action.
By this point, Arnold had proven to Hollywood that he could be successful in both action and comedy, leading actors like Stallone to follow in his footsteps, but not with as good results. However, I have another video for that story. By the mid-90s, Arnold would reunite with his old team from Twins, Reitman and DeVito, creating one of Arnold's most bizarre movies, Junior. Arnold and DeVito would play two doctors who want to get approval for their new medication, expecting. However, as human experimentation is not approved, Arnold himself decides to try it, becoming pregnant and dealing with all the hormonal problems, as well as with his new relationship with Dr. Diana, played by Emma Thompson. I remember this one perfectly, especially the nightmare scene with the baby who has Arnold's face. I don't know what they were thinking. Overall, I think the idea was interesting, but they didn't explore it very well. Falling into quite easy cliches, Arnold's performance here, unlike in Twins, doesn't help this time. As from my point of view, I did feel that he was somewhat naive and clumsy, at least for a doctor and a scientist, although I wouldn't categorize it as a bad performance either. Unlike me, other critics of the time like Roger Ebert gave it a 3.5 out of 4 stars and mentioned, "I know this sounds odd, but Schwarzenegger is perfect for the role. Observe his acting carefully in Junior, and you'll see skills that many serious actors could only envy." The movie would be the lowest grossing one with $108 million, costing almost $60 million. Arnold would then continue his phase of alternating comedy with action films like True Lies or Last Action Hero, quite good in my opinion, and by 1996 he would make what, for me, would be his most remembered comedy, Jingle All the Way.
Oh, these cookies! I gotta get the recipe from Les.
Put that cookie down! Now!
I say most remember perhaps because it's the only one I've seen multiple times over the years, thanks to the fact that every Christmas there was at least one TV channel airing it. I don't think this happened with the others. The original idea by Randy Kornfield came after trying to get a Power Rangers toy for his son, although it would be also inspired by the scarcity of other toys like the Cabbage Patch Kids. Arnold plays a father who has to get a Christmas gift for his son, and to do that, he has to overcome obstacles like a competition with Myron, played by Sinbad, and even fight with Santa Claus, who apparently was a WWE legend, The Big Show. In this movie, although Arnold has good scenes, I think Sinbad and Phil Hartman steal the show, playing perfect villains. This one did also quite well at the box office. It went on to gross $129 million worldwide, recouping its $75 million budget in the first 10 days of release. This one is undoubtedly my favorite on Arnold's comedy side, but I must admit it's more due to a factor of nostalgia and that every time they repeat it, for some reason I end up watching it again. The new millennium would take Arnold down a different path, not only in comedy but in cinema, focusing more on political endeavors than acting, with perhaps Killing Gunther being one of the few comedies he would make after the 90s. There would also be sequels to Kindergarten Cop and Jingle All the Way that I didn't even know existed. But judging by the trailers, I don't think I'll ever watch them. A sequel to Twins was considered, possibly called Triplets, with Eddie Murphy or Tracy Morgan as the third brother. Unfortunately, with Reitman's passing in 2022, the idea was discarded. Looking back at Arnold's comedy legacy, in my opinion, I believe he had more memorable movies than other actors who specialize in comedy. Furthermore, upon rewatching them, I think they are acceptable films worth watching, except for,